If the question is labels, I can't speak for any other LGBT
No, it's not just labels.
Person,
it's definitionally, if Brian says he's a lesbian, what makes him a liar?
It's that he doesn't have the follow through of actually showing that that's what he's interested in.
What does that mean? That doesn't mean anything.
He's not dressed like a woman. He's not presenting as a woman.
So you can only be
he's
that
never
gender
taken on
if
that
you
identity.
So you can only be that gender if you present that way?
Nope. If you
Well,
say
then that's a contradiction.
For him,
All right,
for
fine.
Brian,
We can move
yeah.
on.
Are there transgender people in China?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Is it accepted though?
Yes.
Not widely.
Not widely. Okay.
It's providential, right?
Like secretly?
Yeah.
I guess so, but there is a famous dancer as well as a comedian, a talk show comedian who is like trans, like she.
Okay.
But
And,
it's also hated, right?
okay. So
Right.
you
Right.
said
That makes sense.
Yeah, you wouldn't want your family to.
you
be
said a man
trans.
dating a transgender woman is straight. Why do you think that is?
It's all a matter of definition. Like if you say it's transgender woman, you already define her as a woman, then automatically like that person would be straight.
Right, she's right. It's just trivially true. So if you define it as such, it would just be trivially true, but it doesn't point at what we're trying to point at. So she's right. Like it would just be trivially true if you said a woman is anybody who identifies as a woman. I identify as a woman. Then it's trivially true that I'm a woman.
Yep.
Right. But it doesn't point at anything, right? We're not pointing.
Who's pointing?
I
Well,
feel like
because-
I'm in the
because
middle. I
anytime-
understand what you're saying, but
because
I
anytime
understand
we
the
make-
people who have that mindset
Yeah, because
as
anytime we
well.
make a definition of anything, we want it to point to the thing we're pointing to, right?
Why does any human feel like they need to define or point towards any other human sexuality? Or
Because
what
we
they're
couldn't
doing
have
behind closed
communication
doors?
if we didn't have definitions for what we're trying to communicate.
Well, that needs to change.
No, it doesn't. If
I
I'm
feel like
smoking a cigarette and everybody knows what cigarette means, and you're trying to convey the information that I'm smoking a cigarette, but I'm actually chewing gum, does it make sense that you say cigarette for gum if nobody understands what you're saying?
Unless you're chewing nicotine gum.
But see,
Yeah,
that's
but
what I'm
you see what I
trying
mean?
to
Like,
say
you
about
just made
gay
my
and
point for me.
queer. It's that the reason that in this circumstance of the example you were giving before with the son and the transgender girlfriend, it's that you wouldn't specifically say, is it gay? Because the person
No, but he
is...
does say
it's
that.
queer.
He does ask that.
What?
So I would say queer.
So what is a woman?
A woman, I mean, oh my gosh, I have to get into it. Like,
Yes.
a woman basically is usually a person who is born with a vagina and the genitalia of what we typically would know as a woman.
Usually he's doing a lot of heavy lifting there.
Usually,
He's
it
saying
is.
It's doing a lot of...
Because I know that there's people who
Yeah, so
don't
what is a woman? Like when we point to a definition, we don't say usually,
I
right?
know.
Because otherwise the definition doesn't mean anything.
try to
Right?
be
Like
inclusive.
if I said a camera's usually a component base that a camera had but also an electrical board had, I'm not pointing at anything. So what is a woman?
A woman is someone who has a vagina.
Born with a vagina.
Yeah.
Wait,
Okay.
can I ask a clarifying question on that?
Okay.
So you're familiar with the term neo-vagina?
Actually, I'm not.
Okay, so you know-
Neo?
But she said
Okay.
born with.
Oh, is that something like you?
Did she say born?
She said born
I
with.
thought she was a woman with a vagina. Can you repeat it one more time?
I would say, yeah, a woman born with a vagina.
Oh, okay, fair enough. What's a woman?
Anyone who presents or identifies as a woman.
Your definition?
Has a vagina.
Same, has a vagina.
Wait, well, just to be clear, transgender women can get a surgery that gives them what they would call a vagina. So
Now,
just want to clarify.
They wouldn't
when you
be
guys say
biological, but they
Right.
would be a woman, a
You'd
transgender
say-
woman. And
So
I do,
just yes, that's what I'm
transgender
getting to
woman.
because I don't consider the transgender surgery what they do, the bottom surgery. That's not a vagina. So I just want to be really precise in our language here.
Yeah.
Are you saying a woman born female with a vagina?
So
or?
a woman who's born with a vagina, and then a transgender who goes through the surgery is transgender woman. What other people want to call themselves and do? Yeah, That's up to you to label.
Okay, so are you agreeing with her?
I'm agreeing with the same.
Okay, so a transgender
I
woman
do
is a woman.
see a distinction between the two, but they're both women.
Okay. What is a woman?
A woman is someone who either presents themselves as a woman or goes through the process to be able to present themselves as a woman because there's a difference between sex and gender.
Okay.
And what is a woman?
Like a woman is a person with a vagina, but like I know people are sometimes born with no complete vagina.
Like intersex?
Hermaphrodite.
Intersex?
Intersex, like they have both. Like
They can be. They would call those chimeras or hermaphrodites.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about those cases, but there are cases that like their genes are like
XXY?
no, but like XX, but however they're
Sure, they're still
like,
males.
No, they are females. Like
XX is male. XY is. No, I'm
No,
sorry.
XX
XY is male.
XX
XX is female.
Yeah, yeah.
But you can have XXY,
Yeah.
Yes.
right?
Yeah,
And things
but-
like this where you're still the opposite sex.
Yes, but I'm not talking about that
Here,
case.
what is
like,
a woman? Just define it.
a woman is a person with a complete vagina, or like they have problems with their vagina, but they were raised up like as a social female.
Okay, so you're talking like a birth defect.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. What about transgender women? Are they women?
Like, do they still have a penis?
But I'm a bit
No,
confused
we're
because
just
you said
asking you what-
born. You said born
I
with a
didn't-
vagina.
No, I said with a vagina, I think.
Yes.
Oh, you said a woman is someone with a vagina, not
Yes.
born with a vagina.
Right.
Okay, so that would include at least in your view, that would include transgender women.
Do they still have dicks?
Yeah, they cut
Sure,
their dick
let's say
off.
they get rid of the
If they-
penis.
Yeah, then it's okay.
Okay.
Then it's one. Okay, cut one follow up on that. Can a male become a female?
Well. Okay.
They can do whatever they please and identify with, but personally, I just and
Hold on. So I'm asking you a question.
yes,
So there's gender.
Can a man
Hold on,
become a
hold on.
woman?
No. There's gender and sex. So I'm
Yes.
talking gender. A man can become a woman? I think some of you are going to say yes. If we're talking about sex, can a male become a female?
if it's not about gender, no.
Okay.
Can a male become a female?
I don't think I get the question.
Can you scoot your mic that way? I
think I do.
Yeah.
So the separation between sex and gender. Gender is your expression of how you identify. Sex is your actual like
Chromosomes,
physical
yes.
body.
Yes.
Can a male actually become a female?
Quick answers if
Yes.
you can, guys.
Yes.
If they're a hermaphrodite and you have both inside of you,
I'm speaking in generalities here. I'm not looking for like the.
I'm even willing to
The
accept
fringe.
it. I'm
Yeah.
actually willing to accept the specifics. So if you think a hermaphrodite can become the other sex, I think that's fine.
yeah.
Okay.
But but I don't think we got really definitive there. Can a male become a female?
So yeah, so if he was like presenting, but he has ovaries,
Okay.
right? Yeah.
But that's okay. But like, how about there aren't birth defects? Like an otherwise normal, healthy male, can they become a female?
He can't have. He can become a woman, but female with
sure.
ovaries. If you're looking
Can't
at
become a female.
biological.
Okay. What about you?
No.
No.
Not completely the same as.
Okay. I just want to point out, you are all of you who said a woman is this, that. You're all you're all science deniers. All of you are science deniers. Biology is a hard science.
Hard.
It's not a soft science like psychology and sociology.
And economics.
Hard sciences like biology, for example, with established facts, it's not up for negotiation. It's not up for debate.
Or
Just to be clear.
I think that depends. So for me, I would ask this. Why do you, specifically you, as a hetero, married, happily, as you mentioned, man, why do you care?
Well, I'll dive into it and I'll show you why. Actually, this is I'm sorry. I know I was having a conversation. You couldn't help but butt in. Go ahead.
I feel like I kind of
And I don't
understand
care.
why.
But anyway, so back to this conversation over here. I can't
I'm
believe that
on
you
your
just
side.
butted in while we were having the discussion, but you couldn't help yourself. But here's the thing. I think that that's a fair question. And I'll explain my position. But let's start with this. I want to show you something that's super important.
Okay.
In philosophy, we call this an infinite regress. An infinite regress would be if I ask you, in this case, for like a definition, and you give me the thing that I'm asking about as the definition, it infinitely regresses. And I'm going to show you how this works in real time. So I asked you, what is a woman? And you said a woman's anybody who identifies as a woman. That seems fair, right? Okay. Is she a woman?
To me, looking at her sitting here, yes.
Am I a woman?
No, because you definitely don't present and have stated that you are not.
That seems fair, that there's distinctions between the two of us. Mm-hmm. So if I ask the criteria again, what differentiates me from her? If you say a woman's anyone who identifies as a woman, okay, I'm a woman.
All right.
What differentiates us now?
Well, despite the fact you became a woman 5 seconds
Sure.
ago.
But I am now.
Physically.
What
just the physical.
What differentiates us?
The physical characteristics of being female. At this point in your transition, ma'am, that's a big difference.
And what are those differences?
I don't see boobs. I don't think there's a vagina present.
Then it sounds to me like when you say woman, you actually don't mean anybody who says woman, because that doesn't give you enough information. It sounds like you mean there has to be other criteria there.
Just
Otherwise,
off
how could
looking.
you? Otherwise, how could you make the distinction?
Because you would tell me, like you just did, you'd say, guidance, I'm a woman. And from there on out, I would respect you.
But why
as a
is
woman.
it that you would instantly see her as a woman and not instantly see me as one?
But the same reason why you would look at me and say African American and not Latina.
That makes
Hispanic.
sense. So if I were to say like black definitionally, I might point to like skin, I might point to hair, I might point to all sorts of physical differentials,
That's right.
I would not say anybody who identifies as black, would I?
Nope.
Why?
Because you can't really and truly choose that race is different than sex.
Yeah, but hang on. Before,
earlier,
I'm not
like-
saying they're the same.
Yeah,
I'm
so
just
there's-
asking you
so why
this.
compare
I'm just
them?
asking you this one question.
Yep.
What would make me not black?
You're not. You don't. You're
So
not
if you
black.
gave a definition of black versus white, you would be pointing to criteria,
'Cause that's
which made a
race.
differential between black and white.
You can't
But how is
choose
it
that,
you can
though.
look at
Michael
me and
Jackson
say,
did.
how is it that you can look at me and say man, look at her and say woman?
Because you are
But the second
presenting
I
as
say,
man.
but I identify as a woman, suddenly those distinctions go away. That's an infinite regress. What that means is, what is a woman? A woman's anyone who says they're a woman. Yeah, but what is that though? Well, anyone who says they're that thing. But what is that? Anyone who says they're that. But what is it though? It's anyone who says they're it, right?
I don't think the people, there's no one asking that question.
Yeah, but
other than
that's what they
people
are
like
asking.
you.
What- that
that's
is
just-
what they're asking. And so the thing
That's
is,
what y'all are asking.
Yeah, it
but
is what-
true
it is
people
what we
who
all are asking.
on that spectrum,
But
we
it's
don't
super-
care.
but it-
no
no,
one
yeah, I
else
know you
cares
don't care, but it's
other
super
than
important to us.
men who are not happy with the state of
but
males
it's
in
still
the
super
country
important to
and the
us
world.
because
To who's us?
Yeah, so
Who's
to the
us?
people who don't believe in the ideology.
There you go.
Of,
I think that
of
answers
wait
it,
a
doesn't
second.
it?
Anybody can just identify as anything to become that thing. You say, no, they can't. But when I say, what's a woman? You say, anybody who identifies as a woman. I say, well, what distinguishes me from her? This. And then I say, okay, so what is a woman? Well, anybody who identifies as a woman. You're not pointing at anything. You have an empty label. It points to nothing.
I think because
Listen. I want to explain this so that
You've
you
been
know.
explaining it.
It's a logical. It's actually logically fallacious.
Mm-hmm.
It's called an infinite regress fallacy.
Mm-hmm.
What you're doing is you're infinitely regressing. So you're just always saying the same thing, but never pointing to anything. So if I were to ask you, what's a guitar? And you said anything I point to and say it's a guitar. Have you told me what a guitar is?
No. But I think most people, when you say guitar, they form an image of a guitar in their mind.
Yeah,
so
I
if
agree.
you just say, hey, if
I
you want
totally
to play
agree.
a drum as a guitar, You can do that, but I think
I totally agree with
we're
this.
removing the human experience from all of this.
It's only the
because-
human experience which can identify what is a guitar. Who can make a
Right.
guitar besides a human?
Oh, I don't know.
Nobody. Nothing can make a guitar but a human, as far as we know. So if that's the case, when I say, what is a guitar? And you say anything I point to and say it's a guitar, you say, that tells me nothing. I agree. If I asked you this question, and just describe it for me, what is a guitar?
An instrument with strings.
What does it look like?
There's so many shapes of guitars.
Yeah, but what do they generally at least look like?
Long stick, strings, and a bottom part. I don't even know what you call
So
that.
based on that, I can at least say that I can rule out everything without strings as an instrument as not being a guitar, right?
Sure. If
Now
you
we're
choose.
getting to what a definition is, right?
Sure.
And that's the distinction between an empty label and a definition. When you say that's a guitar, at least I can point to what that is. When you say anything I point to is a guitar, that tells me fucking nothing about what a guitar
So
is.
are we so simple-minded in 2025
No,
that
broad-minded.
if we don't have a distinct
Hang on.
description for a person, their sexuality, their preferences, if we can't define it, it's not right. If
Not
we
even-
can't define, no, I listened
Yeah.
to you for a long time.
Okay, go ahead.
If we can't define it, it's wrong. If we can't define it, it's confusing. If we can't define it, it's not scientific. There are a lot of things in science and biology and history and art that are undefinable. You cannot define a person. And honestly, just blatantly speaking, people like you do not have a seat at the table because it's not for you.
We're the only ones who have the seat at the table.
That table is just for y'all. But I would think that I know that the people who are on the rainbow spectrum, we don't care.
Yeah, but the
But
thing
y'all
is-
do, and it's interesting because I feel all I hear behind it to me is we don't understand y'all, so we feel threatened.
No,
by
no,
it.
what's-
Why? What are
well,
you
what's so
threatened by?
interesting is, like,
Does my fake
it sounds-
penis really
Yeah.
do
But
something
it
that
sounds
big to
me
the
like you're
male
saying
ego? Does
it
my
sounds to
strap
me
really
like
do that?
You do
I guess
understand.
it does.
You do understand us.
Wow.
It sounds to me like you're saying you do understand us, and we feel threatened by that.
No.
So, well,
I
it has
feel
to.
like
It
you
has to
have
be the
to
case. It has to be the
define
case.
us. Why do you have to define us?
Well, here's the thing. It has to be the case.
Does it?
Yeah, logic. You can't beat logic.
You can't put logic to love and human experience.
Right, you can't
so
put logic.
It's unquantifiable.
Right, logic is the one thing you can't ever refute.
Is love logical? Have you
Yes.
experienced love?
Actually,
logic?
love is logical. Yes.
Or is it emotion? It can be. And
No,
when
it's
it
not
gets
can
to
be.
that point,
It is logical.
No, we just ran
It
the
is
experiment.
logical.
No. We just ran the experiment in front of
Okay.
everyone here.
Yeah.
Based on swipes.
Yeah.
There's no logic in a swipe. You get a 5-6 second. Oh, I like that. I don't like that. I like what I see. I don't like what I see. And
Well,
then you get into the deeper.
Hang on, let me
parts
respond.
of
Let me
that
respond.
person.
Let me respond. Actually, there is. Not only is there a logic to it, but the whole reason we're having the discussion is about the logic of it.
Of
Just because
dating?
if you say, well, what happens, Andrew, is that there's an influx of emotion which, based on these emotions, humans have interactive experiences where they swipe left, swipe right, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's within the compliance of logic. There's absolutely nothing illogical about that. Saying I have emotions, therefore I act on emotions, logically follows. There is nothing illogical about that. There is, however, something highly illogical about giving an empty label to a definition of a thing you're trying to describe. That's completely illogical.
I don't think the label can't. I mean,
It's
I don't
not
know
a
the
label.
history of it.
We're not
or-
talking about labels. We're talking about defining a thing so that it can be even understood.
At the end of the day, I don't care what the person, who the person I'm interacting with, whatever their label or definition for themselves is, that's great for them.
So would it
That's
be fair to say you don't care about logic?
I don't care about descriptors and
Which would be
definitions of
logic. So
humans.
can you even have logical interactions without descriptors?
Heck yeah.
How?
And if you can't, then that
Is there a
leaves lot
single
to be
thing
said
that you
for
can logically express without a descriptor? All words are descriptors.
Yeah. Feelings are
Aren't all
descriptors,
words
too.
descriptors? Yeah, but how do you describe feelings?
With words.
Yeah, exactly. So all words are descriptors. When you say feelings, you're describing
I don't
something.
think I think our disconnect is I'm not disagreeing with you as far as there are labels, there are definitions.
I'm not talking about labels.
There are words to describe people. There are scientific terms and things to describe genitalia. None of that's false. 1,000% with you. I think my personal standpoint on that is none of that matters to those that it doesn't matter to. But to those that it does, that's great. Is there, if you want to quantify that information and use it in your dating experience, like by all means. But for me as a person, the first thing I'm asking or looking for when I swipe left or right or talk to a person is not, is your vagina surgical or biological? It just isn't.
But this doesn't answer the question. Like, how come I'm not black?
I don't know. You'd have to ask your mom that.
You don't know why I'm not black? You don't know?
No.
I just want you to look me in the eyes and say, I don't know why you're not
You
black.
also can't get like surgery to
I just want to make sure
present as
hang on.
black either.
Yeah, I
that
could.
I know of.
Yes, you
get
can.
surgical
Yes,
African-American?
yes,
Can
you
you do
can.
Do that.
And did Michael Jackson get surgery?
Yeah. He became white.
Cancer, I think.
Yeah, but did he get surgery also? Yes. And so the thing is like, if I could get surgery, that would make my skin look like your skin. Am I black?
That depends. Do I care? No. I mean,
That is my question about whether you care or if I am black.
it kind of is, because if you ask the person who really debated that kind of thing with people and that kind of stuff mattered, of course they'd have an opinion and they'd have an answer.
So
but
you have no opinion on if I bleached or in some way changed my skin to be black,
Nope.
would I be black?
your experience of blackness, authentic or not, biological or not, is yours. My authentic experience of blackness is mine. Your experience as a newly
Would I be
This
black
is a
or
weird
not?
experience. That's not up to me.
No.
That he just doesn't answer any. He just don't answer questions. This is the biggest problem with this whole ideology, right? Is like you can't answer a single question. You go.
I'm not even
You just
asking
go
the
like this. You
question.
just go like this.
That's
You just
why.
go, maybe. And it's like it tells us nothing about anything. It just literally tells.
Because we don't care. I think it's
Okay.
only our age group and up that's
I get
really
what
like
you're saying.
microscope.
There's
relating
nothing to
them
get.
each other.
Yeah,
in the
it's hard.
There's nothing to
There's
get.
much.
No, I'm.
What I'm saying is
Can I-
objectively true, and what she's
Can I
saying
go
is
off of what you're
objectively
saying?
nothing.
So when you're saying if you suddenly got a surgery and became black tomorrow, would you be considered black by everybody? And the thing.
No, that's not what I'm asking.
Would you be seen as black?
Nope, that's not what I'm asking
He's
either.
just asking
he's
if he's
asking,
black.
is he
No.
Would
black?
he be? So like if we're relating it back to gender.
What
and,
am I
like,
asking? Start with this before you straw man the entire position and fuck it all up. What am I
I'm trying to
asking?
just
What
go
am
off
I
what you're
asking?
saying, 'cause
Hang
we
on,
started with gender, didn't we?
Stop
We started with
spurging.
gender.
Stop spurging and just answer my question. What am I actually asking? And then I'll tell you if it's wrong. What I'm actually asking.
Would you be considered
No.
or seen as black?
Nope.
He's,
Would he
he's
be
just
black, I
asking.
think?
Is he
No.
black?
Black.
I'm not asking
Explain.
about perception. I'm not asking about any of that.
Would you be?
I'm asking, would I be? So let me ask you this again. That's why I don't allow people to straw man my position with bullshit. If
going
I
off of
were
the gender part
to
of it.
somehow go through and get all of my skin reconstructed to look exactly like hers, would I actually be black or not?
In my opinion, no.
Okay, thank you. That's
to
why I
go-
don't.
can
That's
we go
right.
back to gender real
That's
quick,
it.
though?
No, that's it.
Okay.
The whole debate right now, what you just did was you demonstrated how illogical the entire position is of saying, but if I presented as a woman, you would be. That's fucking absurd by your own logic now.
But if
So
you're
I'm going
dating,
back to
how would
the-
we know that you're not biologically
All right.
black?
No, it's
No,
good.
I'm on.
said that.
I want to go
add
off of your
something.
point with that statement in regards to gender and kind of mapping it onto each other. If you decided tomorrow to become a woman and you didn't have the experiences of a lifetime of being a woman,
Like no man does.
Yeah, I as a cisgender
So then
woman,
no man could become a woman.
I'm going with your point here that
Yeah.
I would be upset.
So then no man can become a woman, can they?
It's for me, no.
Yeah, no, exactly.
no.
All right.
And
I'm
I
good.
feel
I'm going to
like-
go off and smoke.
And I feel like the whole argument kind of takes away from cisgender women kind of rallying together almost for a certain type of feminism.
Hold on. Well, you asked why this matters.
Yeah.
Why this matters. I'd like to give you 3 reasons.
All right.
And you might not agree with the gravitas of why this would be important. But
Can I ask also, why does it matter and who does it matter to? It may be part of your answer, but I think that's important.
yeah,
too.
so I think the first one I'll give you will matter to everybody,
Okay.
and that's the truth.
That is the reason. The truth is the
So
reason.
that would matter to everyone, and that's the first reason I would give you as to why it matters. Truth.
So are we speaking in terms of like you're
I'm
dating
speaking
someone?
about the truth. I'm speaking of
No, you
the
said
truth,
three.
not your truth, not
Yeah.
my truth, the truth of the matter.
In
And
terms
this
of
is-
dating, though, right? Or are we just talking about generally
No,
speaking?
I'm speaking about that males can't become female. Males, like, that's,
Biologically.
They
right?
literally-
well, I'm not even, look, I don't think you can, I'm willing to grant that within the ideology, I guess it's accept you can change your gender, but I link gender and it's irremovable from sex in my worldview.
Sure.
So in my worldview, a man can't become a woman, and a transgender woman is a transgender woman,
Yeah.
but she's not a woman.
Sure.
Because to me, in my
Yeah.
in my worldview, woman is linked to sex, and it's
Yeah.
it's irremovable.
I don't think any of us disagree with that.
Now the second thing is
Yeah.
that since it's a dating podcast, I'll relate it to dating. I think that one, transgender women have a duty to disclose to potential romantic partners.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Because one, I think it would be good for their own safety.
Yes.
So if you're a transgender woman and you're trying to date I don't like this term, a cis man, for your own safety, you should disclose beforehand so that they can
Yes.
choose whether perhaps for them they don't want to date a transgender woman.
Agreed.
Yeah.
For their own safety, I think they should disclose. But if we start getting into too deep into well, transgender women are women and this is non-negotiable, then it's like, okay, well, do regular women have to disclose to men, by the way, I'm not a transgender woman? So we get into this kind of murky territory where there's less of a duty for transgender women to disclose. They might even feel like, no, it's actually perfectly acceptable for me to essentially trick men into sleeping with me.
Right.
So I think they have a duty to disclose. And then
agree.
also
Yeah.
related to dating, what if I, as a man, don't want to date a transgender woman? Am I, if the narratives allow to fully manifest themselves as it relates to this ideology, what kind of social repercussions are there when I have a preference towards not dating transgender women, but if on a long enough timeline, it becomes determined, like if the greater, right now there's a massive culture war related to this issue, but let's say I'm in the minority one day, you know, and maybe the leftists, the LGBTQ activists, they win on the culture war. And 90% of people are like, that's a transgender woman, and you can't ask them if they're transgender. And if you don't sleep with them, you're a bigot. And what do bigots deserve? Bigots deserve violence. Bigots deserve to lose their jobs. Bigots deserve, bigots deserve all kinds of repercussions, both social and sometimes when it comes to violence.
Isn't that what
So-
transgender people have been getting for tens?
Sure, I'll go ahead and grant
So the
that
tables
sure.
turn, and now we're upset.
Well,
basically,
hold on.
right?
I don't
Well,
think
I don't
that's,
want violence
I don't
either.
think
Right,
Yeah,
violence
no
either
violence
way.
either
I don't
but
think that's
I'm-
fair, but I don't think people should be subject to violence
No,
for,
of
their,
course
for their
not.
dating preferences.
No. Right.
But I could see some sort of scenario in the future where if somebody does have a stated preference of not wanting to date somebody who's transgender, if that is bigotry, if we're using that metric as bigotry, people are happy to enact violence to
that's
Aren't we on a
for-
slippery slope?
against bigotry.
Sorry.
And then so that's the second
Well,
thing.
hang on. Before you get into this, I want to bid the Whatever Podcast adieu.
Wait, Andrew, I got
I brought in. Hang on. I brought in tons of
No,
great
it's not about
viewers.
the money.
Hang on, tons of cash tonight. I got to be fresh tomorrow for a debate, Brian. Got to be fresh tomorrow.
What if Mary goes and gets you
It has
in now?
nothing to do with that. I got to be fresh.
That's fair.
That's a
and,
pretty
fresh
good-
for a debate
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Wait.
I appreciate.
Andrew, can I?
Brian.
Hear my pitch. Hear my pitch.
There's no pitch.
This right here. This.
Are you going to delay the debate for tomorrow? Okay, see you later, Brian.
Wait.
Guys, all of you.
Wait,
very
Andrew,
much.
I might be able to delay it a little. Actually, not. Fuck it.
Yeah, no,
All right,
you're not
all
going
right,
to delay.
That's fine. That's
all
fine.
right, I got to get some sleep. Everybody out there,
Yeah, Andrew,
whatever.
we got a long day tomorrow.
Everybody out there at the whatever chat, thank you so much for having me this fine evening. I appreciated
I tried
talking
to
to
offer
all
one
of you
and
fine women. I take
Tried to
nothing
offer it
personally.
and
I've never taken anything personally. We're
this is
here
great.
to
That's right.
debate worldviews and talk about dating, and I really, truly appreciate it. All of you have.
She's gonna clip. Sorry. She's gonna be like, I made him rage quit. Go ahead. Sorry.
It's all love, brother. It's all
I
love.
won.
Didn't mean to interrupt your goodbye. Sorry. Go ahead.
You're really trying really hard here, Brian. Have a wonderful night, my friend. Have a wonderful
Thank you
night,
very
ladies.
much.
Take good care of yourself.
Great meeting you.
Tomorrow.
safe.
I will see you tomorrow, Andrew.
Seethe, Brian. Fucking seethe, Brian.
Felicity, just scoot it down one chair.
Amazing.
All right. So I was saying the third point on this is laws, and I'll just ask a simple question on this, then we'll move on to a different topic. So the first is truth. The second is like dating, since dating podcast. Do you think that we should criminalize, say, if you were a dictator, like, do you think misgendering, for example, intentional? So somebody refuses to acknowledge, so somebody's pronouns, it's a transgender woman, and my pronouns are, I want to be referred to her as a she or a her. But somebody ideologically differs from her view and thinks that's not a woman, that's a man, and refuses to use the pronouns and says you're a he, you're a him. Do you think that this should face, if used in certain circumstances, should face criminal punishment or some sort of punishment?
Not necessarily, I guess. I mean, it's hate. I mean, I don't know.
That it's hate?
mean-
How's it hate? Okay, so go ahead.
You're saying they're purposely not using the correct pronouns, or they did on accident
Intentionally,
not using the correct pronouns.
but not in a rude way. You might say it's rude on the surface already, but not like not in a mocking or condescending way, but like in the same way that they would say it's a she, says he.
You're this person's, like, are you over this person in a place of hierarchy? Like, you're their boss, and this person is.
It could be any scenario, but they're not like intention. When I say intentional, they're not intentionally being condescending or rude about it.
Right.
They're just like, this is what I believe. I'm not saying it in like a snarky way. It's just like, Felicity, that's a she. But if she thinks she's a he, I'm not like, oh, she's great. If that makes
depends.
sense.
If you're her boss, I think then you have an obligation to your employee to use the pronouns that they are choosing. If you're her friend or something, I mean, she can't really do anything or have any backlash
But
towards
if you're the
you.
dictator, if you were the dictator,
See,
right?
that's already in itself a problem, but okay. Let's go.
Would you pass a law criminalizing intentional misgendering?
Depends on who the law is for. Bosses and CEOs and people of power? Sure. I mean, they haven't.
Okay. And,
But like me and you, if I called you a he, I mean, I hope you
the
wouldn't sue me
streets.
or
No, I
something
wouldn't
like
care.
that.
in
you know?
the,
Yeah,
in the
no criminalizing
the mean,
on this one for me.
gosh,
No
no.
criminalizing.
the mean streets of Santa Barbara.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God. Brutal.
Crazier.
It's wild out here.
And criminalization can be like a fine, or are you talking about like jail time?
Let's start with just a fine. It's a $500 fine to misgender.
No. I misgender people about, well, I guess mistake.
Yeah, there's mistakes and stuff. I say no.
Clearly intentional. So here would be the example.
Still no.
The person says, here are my pronouns, and the person refuses to use them and says he
Right.
instead of she.
Yeah, no
Intention-
criminalizing.
Intentionally. Should that be criminalized? Should there be a fine?
No.
No.
Me and you standing on the balcony, I tell you I'm a he, you continue to call me a she. No fine. Me and you sitting right here on this podcast live, and I have said to this group, I identify as a he, him, and you continue to call me she, her, you're getting sued. That's all it is to it.
Oh yeah, but that's
I
different, and that's different than like criminalizing. Then that's like
Well,
you're
that's
in libel,
civil.
slander. Yeah, you're civil.
Right. yeah.
That wouldn't be libel or slander.
No, it would be.
but
What would it be? But yeah, but essentially that's a civil case.
Right. So
Are
it's
you in
very
favor
situational.
of civil penalties for?
situation.
That's on the individual.
Also, in that situation, like, because it's a whole thing with IDs and passports now, like, do they have to have it legally put on their stuff that they are that gender? Or are they, because that's, if it's legal and there's legal ramifications, then you could just change it back, like, tomorrow.
Why is sex on our, like, why at this point, or sex even on our IDs and stuff? We don't need to know if you're
should
male
there
or
be like a
female.
fine for misgendering?
I don't think you could bring it into law because, like I was saying, there's stuff with IDs and like people don't automatically just change those legal documents.
Okay.
Yeah,
So then-
it's murky, but I think that there should be
You can't get a
chat.
What do you
fine for
think,
name
Abby?
calling.
Huh?
What do you think?
So
No, I don't think there shouldn't. There
No fine.
shouldn't be no
What do you
fine.
think? No fine. Well, what about this? High school students.
Mm-hmm.
So they're classmates, right? That would be a new context. Should there be like maybe a detention for a misgendering, intentional misgendering, or should there be maybe if they repeat it 3 times, should there be a suspension?
no, I think it depends on
That
the
person
person.
knows that they're causing harm, so it's not even about the misgendering. It's about that you're intentionally trying to cause someone harm. So there should be a repercussion if you're, especially if you're in school.
Yeah, but you would just make the reverse argument that by them using, like if it's just totally separate, maybe they're religious, you would be causing the individual harm because they're causing themselves harm by lying. If they think it's lying, if they don't think it's the truth, then you're inflicting harm on them.
It does no harm for you to say he, she, they, or
Then
them
it-
to a
then it
person.
must-
It just
I think then
doesn't.
we're playing the
It
victim.
doesn't.
There's that
For his
playing the
argument,
victim
he thinks
on
it's
that.
lying,
But then-
and people
then it
are
must-
against lying.
You can justify a lot of
but-
crazy shit if you
Exactly.
go into other people's business and go, you said this thing and I'm offended by it, which is what we don't like. I'm offended by everything. You said this, you're making me do this. So, yeah, no fines. Okay.
Okay, but
Intentional harm is intentional
Yeah.
harm. Like she said, if you know that a person has stated to you, legally otherwise, I identify as such, what harm, whether you believe it or not, it doesn't matter. If they want to sit there and be a potato, let them be a potato. You're not eating the potato. You acknowledging that that person feels that way about themselves does nothing to you at the end of the day. It just doesn't.
So-
Usually, if you don't like something, you just get away from them. If
just get
someone's an a-hole,
yeah.
you should just get away from them. If someone's misgendering on purpose, just get away from
They
it. It's like
pineapple
dating.
on their pizza. You're
okay,
not gonna.
so there's probably scenarios where just for like simplicity's sake, some people are really hard line with this. Like if I'm just not interested, like in like a particular case offending somebody, or I'm just not like, it doesn't, there's situations where I just don't care.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. I'd probably like go along with it just because like to avoid the situation. There's probably situations where like if you're a student in college and your professor's transgender, like that's probably like, you're probably gonna have to bite the bullet just for the sake of getting a good grade in the class, even if it's
Sure.
against your thought process. But like, I'm speaking, you know, outside of these specific instances, there are situations where, or not, rather not situations, but if we're having a conversation about the issue itself, and we're actually, well, is it a woman? That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about the truth.
Yeah.
Whose truth? Yours or that person?
No, I
See,
get what you're
understand
saying.
What he's
The truth.
saying. There,
Yeah.
to a certain degree, like we all have to live in the same society, and we all do, to a certain point, have to agree on what is the truth.
Yeah.
I don't think it's any different than what like she had mentioned earlier. If it's something you're just not in agreement with, or it's a situation that makes you uncomfortable, get out of it. Now, if it's like a work school situation, you guys you got to learn to figure it out. Do I think it should be criminalized?
And
Probably
what,
not.
what
Yeah,
Brian's
but-
argument is that in the war going on between our society of people who are in agreement and disagreement, let's say he's saying someone's in school, let's say you have a super liberal principal, and so they're like taking the side of the student who's trans or using like different pronouns than they normally would. So of course, like you're at a super liberal school, maybe they're siding with that student. Whereas if you go to a more conservative school, they might be telling the other student like, hey, you're going through some sort of, like, it depends on the the place you are in society. And like that is an issue I see long term in society, is that we have these two opposing views and it is clashing.
And how do we come together?
By admitting that we're all human and our genitals do not matter. At the end of the day, why do we even have, I'm not saying why do we have genders, but why is it, who cares? Like if you put in your resume, I shouldn't be worried about whether you're male, female, or what you present. You're a human being. And I think when we come down to making those gender distinctions, that's why we're at war. At the end of the day, we're all just humans. It doesn't really, this is just us classifying each other like, oh, I'm not going to respect you because the genitals you have don't match with your pronouns. At the end of the day, they're a person, their experience matters, and that's it. It doesn't really matter what they have down there. I mean, it just doesn't.
Yeah, no,
or
no.
what they call it.
I would agree with that, but I feel like especially like in maybe a school or work situation, you're probably going to talk to somebody more directly. Hey, can you do this for me? Not, hey, she. I think that there's really only particular situations, and I think that's why he's asking. If you're a dictator, would you criminalize this in some port? And I think it's a slippery slope, because then it comes down to belief. Some people truly believe that gender and sex are the same thing, where people see the opposite. So how do you criminalize that? And then what's next? Then is it religion?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
You'd have to criminalize ideology on that one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what people are scared, because I think people who have that mindset, the they, thems, the transgender people, the non-binary, it's becoming more and more and more prevalent. And the people who don't identify with that way of life are, in my opinion, freaking out. Like, how do we navigate these LGBTQIA people? Just respect and love them just the way you would a non-LGBTQIA person. And if those situations arise, address them with empathy and love. This person says she, he, they, whatever. I don't really agree with it. I'll call them that while I'm addressing them, because that's how they feel. But at the end of the day, I'll go home and still feel the same way. Is you respecting that person going to change your mindset? Obviously not. So why not just give them that respect and empathy while you're addressing them, especially if you're in a professional setting. At the end of the day, they're just a human. What they decide to call themselves should not matter to you and what you do with your life.
It does matter to a certain group of people, though, who are trying to maintain a certain order in society. And are they right? Are they wrong? Personally, I'm not exactly sure, but it does matter to them, because if these wars between the cultures continue on, it's just going to wreak havoc. And I think while conservatives have their own issues, I think part of the issue that they're having with this is that they see these people as having a very severe mental illness. And while they can respect them as a person, they can't respect the mental illness of it all.
So what do you do if a person has an illness? You disrespect this, and if it is in fact
I wouldn't say
an
you
illness,
disrespect them, but also you don't go blindly with their beliefs.
But if they're sick, then you disrespecting or not respecting their beliefs is not going to heal them. They're still going to.
I was saying earlier, you don't cause harm to people on purpose. However, some people on the more conservative side would be saying, well, they're causing me harm because they're being so mentally ill that it's becoming almost a hassle on society.
So do we sit there and say the same thing about obese people? They are
Some people
literally.
do.
For the sake of time,
do.
For the sake of time, I've got to move it on. We have one chat here from Lulu. If this would actually work. Yes, thank you, Lulu.
Lulu donated $200.
Lulu.
Trans sympathizers are basically willing to bend truth and logic for the sake of trans people's feelings. Chair 2, do you think that making choices based on feelings and emotions is wise for society?
I do. I believe that using your human instincts and treating people with love and respect is how we are going to survive as a race, not by describing each other's genitals or using pronouns. I think at the end of the day, none of that will matter to the success of the human race.